Hi there, it's Professor Fragnito again. So today I'd like to talk to you about EMDR. So EMDR stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing. So a lot of words for a process that's really helpful to clear trauma. So I'm going to talk to you and just kind of give you my spiel that I give everyone when I see someone, I should say, that's ready to do some work on trauma and ready to do some EMDR. Okay, so first, what happens is when we're processing something, when something has happened, any event, let's say that, start there, any event. So right now is an event for you. You're watching this video of me. That's an event. And you process that. So by process, I mean you're thinking about it, and afterwards you'll think about it, and you'll think, oh, hopefully I learned something, and oh, this is maybe something I'm interested in, or that sounds freaky to me. I don't know if I want to do that, or whatever. And it kind of goes into a little file cabinet in your brain, if you will, in a file on something you can pull upon in the future, like things I'm interested to get in training in. Maybe it's in that file, or things I'm afraid of, or maybe it's in that file. So every event we process as much as we can. Now, sometimes our brain does not process events. So this would be what we're looking to process with EMDR. So I'm going to give you some examples to kind of explain what I'm saying a little further. But first, to explain, when you're processing something, when you're thinking really hard about it, the inside of your brain, your eyes are going back and forth really fast, and you really can't see that, but that's what's happening. So what we do in EMDR is we kind of put the client back in that emotion, not back in the, we're not having them relive the trauma. That would be irresponsible and not helpful at all. But what we would have them do instead is kind of talk about the trauma and get back to the emotion of the trauma, and then help them process it through either a light bar, which has lights going back and forth like this, so their eyes are following this back and forth, or some people use their hands and go back and forth in front of a client, or there's buzzers that you can put in your hands that vibrate, they kind of go back and forth, and all these ways are external or outside ways to get that process of this going again. Okay, so hopefully that explains that. And there's some other videos that I'm having you watch this week to kind of explain it further, and also have you do a little bit of reading on it so you know a little more. But let me give you some examples of trauma that's not processed and how it shows itself. Okay, so let's say, and these are all made up, by the way. So let's say when I was about 7, I was on the playground at school. It was on, it was recess, and I'm playing. I'm having a good time. I'm running around. Maybe it's like a basketball or something, and I slip, and I fall in the basketball. Kind of knocks the wind out of me. I start crying, and because I'm scared. And the kids kind of gather around, and maybe a few of the kids are laughing at me and pointing at me and saying, how stupid I am. This is horrible and makes me sad. And anyway, I pick myself back up and kind of go on through my day. And then that night I get home, and, I tell my mom as soon as I come home that the kids were mean to me. And she says, yeah, kids can be mean, go wash up, let's get ready for dinner. And I'm like, okay, kind of don't think about it again. And then let's say now I'm 11, I'm about in 5th grade or so, and I'm in math class, and the teacher is doing, one of those, like a math problem on the board, right? And she's asking for people to give their answer. And she does a problem, and I know the answer, so I raise my hand. I'm like, me, I know the answer. So she calls on me, and I give her the answer, and turns out that I'm wrong about the answer. And the little boy sitting behind me whispers really quietly, he's like, Dad, you're stupid. Why'd you do that? It doesn't feel good. Also kind of feels a little familiar, but I'm just like, whatever, kind of let it go. So now let's fast forward a few years and say I'm about 17, and maybe I have a little boyfriend at school, and we just are hanging out at the lockers with maybe a couple of his friends. It's like lunchtime, we're hanging out by the lockers, and they're telling jokes, and it's really funny. And I want to be funny too, and I actually know jokes, so I start to tell the joke, and I totally ruin the punchline, just blow it, and mess it all up. And my boyfriend is embarrassed, and his friends are looking at me like I'm weird. And he's like, God, you're stupid. Why'd you do that? And, I feel really bad inside. And so then, let's fast forward more. So now I'm about 23, let's say. And now I'm in an adult relationship, and I'm dating a new guy. And, he's not really nice to me. And he tells me I'm stupid a lot. And reminds me that really no one else would put up with me. And, I'm pretty sure he's right about that. I don't know why, because I kind of know I'm smart, but what he's saying I think might be true. So I end up going to a counselor, and I just tell the counselor, I just feel bad about myself. I don't really know why, but I know I'm stupid. So that would be an example of how maybe what could seem to be a little trauma, right, with like a little t, like you learned about before, about me falling down on the playground all the way up to a domestic violence relationship, which would be considered a big T, and how they can be all connected by the same statement. And what's interesting about us human beings is that we tend to find proof to make our statements true. So if I'm already thinking I'm stupid, I continue to find proof of that, right, in my life. Making decisions maybe that aren't the best, or I don't know, just thinking I'm stupid. I'm sure you can relate to that. There's other cognitions, negative cognitions, that are very common when I look at EMDR and when I'm working with a trauma client, such as I'm powerless, I'm out of control, I'm not good enough, something's wrong with me, I'm not safe, I'm bad, I'm not lovable. Those are all super common, and the client usually is coming in with one trauma, and we find the negative cognition. That's usually one of those or something similar to that, and then find that there's 5 other things before it that are proof of that, and this is just the last and most recent thing. Now sometimes that's not true. Sometimes there's just a gigantic trauma, like going out of the country, like say to Haiti for vacation, and that's when the big earthquake happens, and I'm trapped, and they have to dig me out, and I almost die, and I'm traumatized by that, and I have nightmares about it, and so I go see a therapist to process that. That might be separate and alone from anything else, but what I see more often than not is things that are strung together, like the examples I gave you before. So whenever I tell this to a client, they're always nodding and can understand what I'm saying. So I imagine most of you are nodding right now. That they get it. You get it. So what I do with EMDR then, right, is we usually start at the first trauma, even though that's not what they came in for. And they feel like maybe, falling on the ground in front of kids isn't relatable. Well, it is. And what we want to do is we want to work on the first one, because what happens is that one is the original one will feed the other ones to make them more powerful, right? So if I start with the end one, like the one they're coming in, like my example before with the woman with her domestic violence relationship, if we just start there and do EMDR, it probably won't reduce all the way, because we have these other incidents, this other proof, if you will, of where she thinks she's stupid, right? So we start back here. So, and when I explain that to clients, they understand that, things are going to take a little more time. And we work on that, and then we kind of get up here, and what's interesting that happens is when you do it that way, by the time that we get here, this is actually already reduced some. So the effects of her trauma have already gone down a bit, because we've reduced what was feeding it to be so big to begin with. Now, she'll still have some that we need to process, but you see it'll have reduced a bit. So that's super important to explain to a client. What else? So when we start the EMDR, clients always want to know, how long is this going to take? Is this forever? And the very first thing you should know about EMDR is it shaves years off therapy. You could be talking about a domestic violence relationship you had 10 years ago, every single week for 2 years in therapy to process it. With EMDR, we could talk about it for a few weeks to tell your story and to hear about it and kind of see what's going on, and then process it through EMDR in a few more weeks, and you're done. And the thing about EMDR is this: once something is fully processed, it's processed forever. You're not coming back to get a touch-up or, whatever, a tune-up, or, it's not going to come back. So that's really appealing to a lot of clients. And a lot of my clients have a love-hate relationship with EMDR. They hate having to go through the emotional piece because it's intense emotionally. But they love the result, which is they're done with that issue. Maybe for the first time ever, they're done. So really good stuff with EMDR. When you get trained in EMDR, you have to get EMDR done to yourself. So at least in the training, that's recommended further. And then if you go further and get certified in EMDR, you do a lot of EMDR, or you get a lot of EMDR done to yourself. I have been through so much EMDR personally that there's not a client that's going to go through more or worse than me. Like I've been through it, I've been there, I've been through all the emotions. Not in the same way like I'm comparing my traumas, but I'm just talking about the emotional level that you experience. And I think that's super important. So, I'm not afraid to push a client and how far they can go. I'm right there with them. I can do the whole thing with them. So because I've done my own work with that. And not that means that I'm cured and everything's fine, because the truth is we always have stuff that comes up our whole life and we have to go back and do stuff. So, therapy or EMDR or whatnot. And lastly, I would suggest that if anybody is going to be a counselor, and I hope you all are, that you would get EMDR training because it's a fascinating tool, and it doesn't have to be used for someone that has a big trauma, like a domestic violence relationship, or someone that survived an earthquake, or a big car crash where someone passed away and they feel guilty about it, or whatnot. Little traumas like people saying awful things to you that you can't get out of your head. That kind of stuff can be processed with EMDR and have fabulous results. Also, just to let you know, celebrities and movie stars and famous folk do EMDR to help them get over stage fright, to help them work on their confidence level. So you can use EMDR for quite a few things. So anyway, I hope you learn more in your other videos as well, and we continue to chat about EMDR.